When we imagine the air war of the 20th century, we often see aircraft slicing through the clouds, bursts of fire and pilots wrestling for control. But behind that spectacle, inside the metal belly of the bomber, another battle was being fought, one far more intimate and merciless, a struggle against cold, suffocation, and mechanical failure. The consolidated B-24 Liberator was one of the most widely used heavy bombers of World War II. Its long range, heavy payload, and massive production made it a cornerstone of the Allied air campaigns. But it was also the setting of tragedies where death came not only from German fighters or ground defenses, but from the limits of human endurance and machine reliability. This documentary is not about glorification. It's about revealing the silent horrors that claimed the lives of thousands of young airmen, the thin air that starved their lungs, the black clouds of flak that shredded their aircraft, and the mechanical betrayals that ended missions before they began. In these pages, we will expose the lethal statistics and chilling realities that made the B-24 both a weapon of war and a flying tomb. The dimensions of aerial carnage. To grasp the scale, we must first confront the numbers. In 1943 alone, the Allies lost over 1,183 heavy bombers. By 1944, that number surged to around 3,949 bombers destroyed in combat. The 8th Air Force, the backbone of the Allied bombing offensive over Europe, lost around 1,630 B-24s during its operations. In Operation Tidal Wave, the famous low-level raid on the Ploiesti oil refineries in Romania, of the 177 B-24s that took off, 53 were destroyed, and more than 300 men were killed, missing, or captured. Within the 8th Air Force, only about 1 in 4 bomber crews completed their full mission tour, 25 missions, without being killed, wounded, or captured. The B-24 also had a high accident rate, about 35 accidents per 100,000 flight hours, with 490 fatal crashes claiming roughly 2,796 lives, not from enemy fire, but from mechanical failure and pilot error. These were not just machines lost in combat, they were human lives, young men who believed in a cause and found their grave in the sky. The slow agony of thin air, oxygen deprivation, and fatal conditions. The heights and the silent killer. To reach their targets deep inside enemy territory, bombers had to fly high, often above 20,000 feet, 6,000 meters or more. At that altitude, the air was too thin to sustain life. The B-24 was not pressurized. Every crew member depended on oxygen masks and fragile distribution systems that often froze, leaked, or malfunctioned mid-flight. A documented case from January 9, 1945, describes how a pilot of the 376th Bomb Group found dangerously low oxygen reserves just as the bomber reached operational altitude. Some crewmen began showing signs of hypoxia, dizziness, blurred vision, and unconsciousness, all while still hundreds of miles inside enemy territory. Within seconds, lack of oxygen could cause confusion, seizures, and death. Even a minor malfunction meant that entire crews might lose consciousness long before they realized what was happening. The cutting cold. As if suffocation weren't enough, the cold at altitude was another merciless enemy. The B-24's fuselage offered no heating or insulation. Crews wore electrically heated suits, thick gloves, and layered clothing, but these systems were unreliable. A broken wire or a torn seal could expose a man to freezing air within minutes. Temperatures dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius, where skin froze on contact with metal and breath crystallized on goggles. The strain of cold and lack of oxygen weakened even the toughest airmen, turning routine missions into survival ordeals. Too late to save them. If a crew member lost consciousness, recovery chances were slim. In the chaos of formation flight, flak bursts, radio static, engine noise, discovering that someone's oxygen line had failed often came too late. Many gunners and radio operators were found dead at their posts, their faces frozen in silence. The enemy's reach, anti-aircraft fire as an unseen executioner. While the cold and oxygen starvation were silent killers, the most immediate threat came from below. Flak, the German anti-aircraft artillery that filled the sky with shrapnel. The devastating impact of flak accounted for an estimated 30 to 50% of all bomber losses, depending on the theater of operations. Tens of thousands of aircraft were damaged by these invisible explosions. 26,000 bombers of the 8th Air Force alone suffered flak damage during the campaign over Europe. In Operation Tidal Wave, 44 of the 53 lost B-24s were brought down directly by anti-aircraft fire. A single shrapnel fragment could pierce fuel tanks, oxygen lines, or control cables. A lucky shot could set off a chain reaction, fire, explosion, and total disintegration in seconds. Many B-24s that returned from missions were riddled with holes, wings shredded, engines smoking, fuselages cracked. But often, damage to oxygen lines or fuel tanks led to secondary disasters, suffocation, fire, or explosions mid-air. Once oxygen tanks ruptured, flames spread like lightning, devouring everything in their path. Crews faced impossible decisions: stay aboard a burning plane or jump into enemy territory. Finito Benito, serial 42-72891, was struck by flak over Austria. The tail section tore open, smoke filled the fuselage, and the aircraft broke in two as it fell. Only 4 of the 10 men survived. During a mission over Bremen, November 26, 1943, of the 101 B-24s sent, 3 were shot down and many more severely damaged, their crews killed or maimed by shrapnel. For these men, flak was an impersonal executioner. It didn't aim for glory, only annihilation. The machine turns against its masters. Mechanical failures. Even when no enemy was near, the B-24 could become a death trap. The Liberator's Davis wing, designed for efficiency and long range, made it less stable and more fragile than its sibling, the B-17. It demanded precise maintenance. A single hydraulic or fuel line failure could doom the aircraft. Early in its service, crews nicknamed it the Flying Coffin due to its high accident rate and structural weaknesses. Many B-24 crews died not in combat, but during takeoff, training, or transit flights. The aircraft's complex systems, heavy load, and long wingspan made it unforgiving. Records show 1,713 recorded accidents, 490 fatal, causing 2,796 deaths, separate from combat casualties. Some incidents were catastrophic. The Freckleton Air Disaster, August 23, 1944. A B-24H crashed into a village in Lancashire, England, killing all 3 crewmen and 58 civilians, including children, the lethal combination. The worst tragedies came when mechanical failure met enemy fire. A single engine hit by flak could ignite. The strain on the remaining engines caused further breakdowns. A ruptured hydraulic line could lock control surfaces. A small fuel leak could ignite from a spark in the electrical system. In those moments, crews faced an unthinkable choice: stay with the burning aircraft or jump into the unknown. This concludes part 1 of the documentary. We've laid out the brutal statistics, the suffocating conditions, and the cold mechanical truth of why so many never came home. In the next part, we'll move from data to human stories, the first-hand accounts of men who looked into the abyss, felt their lungs freeze, their wings shatter, and their world vanish into smoke.